Hi, hope you're doing all right. I am going to start today by looking at the 3-2B homework and just kind of refreshing how we use the calculator. I sent the cord home with your mom, so in case you run out or whatever, you can just kind of plug that in and charge that up. You can keep it until we're done with class, so that's fine. But remember to enter the information to save you time instead of having to do all those putsy calculations. If you turn on your calculator and then go home and then just toggle down until you highlight the spreadsheet and hit enter, then you can go in and enter all of your data. And I already did that on mine, so I'm just scanning it over. I just did grid E, so the X variable on it. And then I just plugged that all in and entered it in. And remember, when you want to figure out your values, go up and highlight it. Now later on we're going to enter more data and then we'll be able to save it and stuff like that. But right now just highlight what we're interested in finding, and we go to menu, and then I'm interested in stats, so I select 4. I want stat calculations 1, and then 1 variable stat, so I select 1. Again, it's going to go through a number of like lists and things that I want to do. It's going to give me just that one list. Okay. It's telling me that it's where it's going to put. It's going to put all my results in column B. Okay. And so it gives me those values. It actually goes over into volume or into column C as well. But remember that X bar is the mean, and then the next one is the sum of X's, sum of X squared, then our standard deviation, etc. So it asks me here to use the calculator to find the sample mean, the sample variance, that's S squared, so I'll have to do that calculation, the sample standard deviation, and it wants it for both X and Y. And so I just kind of wanted to show you this because this is how they distinguish it sometimes. They will say the sample mean is X bar of X, and so they'll put a little X like subscript X is, and I'll look on my thing here, X bar is 20.3536, so 20.3536. And if I want to find X bar for Y, I'd write X bar Y equals, and I'm going to let you do that calculation, okay? Sample variance, remember, is S squared, so the S of X squared, I'll take my S value, which is here 9 point, oops, nope, up one, S, because if it was population, I'd use the one below, but 9.79, I'm just going to round to 9.79, so I'm going to do 9.79 squared. I'm going to grab my other calculator and do that, 9.79 squared, the little 2 next to it, so I get 95.84. Again, I'm going to round, so that's 95.84. I just took the 95.8441, whatever, and I did 2 numbers after the decimal. And then the sample standard deviation is that S of X is the 9.79 that came from the calculator. And so I'm going to have you do that same thing for Y, but before we jump on, we're going to do the sample coefficient of variation for each grid. And so my coefficient of variation for X is the standard deviation divided by the mean, and again that's and then times 100. So that calculation is what I'll put in my other calculator. So it's 9.79 divided by 20.3536. I probably should have rounded that again, but whatever, times 100, and I got, oops, that seems bad, let me try that again. 9.79 divided by 20.3536 times 100, and I get, that looks better, 48.6, so I'd write that as 48.6%. The last thing asks which grid had more consistent magnetic susceptibility. Well, you're going to have to read the description and find the comparison between the two to answer that. So I'll have you work on that after we're done kind of going through the notes, but get some practice on that, and we can talk about that next time we see each other. But I did want to go on with the last section, and I'm sorry that I'm not here and have to do this through a video, but the last section is box and whiskers, and it deals with percentiles. And a box and whiskers is just another type of plot, but what's nice about it is we get all of our information from our calculator to find our box and whiskers. There's like one other thing that we have to do to find if there are outliers in there, but we'll go through that calculation and how we do that after we go through the setup. Box and whiskers breaks down data into what we call percentiles, into quarters. And so when we make a box and whisker, it has the lowest point as a dot on the end, the highest point as a dot on the far end, and then we create a box in the middle that is surrounded by your first quarter, quartile 1, or sometimes we call that the lower quartile, second quarter, or quartile 2, that's the median, it's also the 50th percentile, and then the third quarter, or the upper quartile, Q3, is up on the upper end. Again, when you do your data on here, it will give you Q1, it'll give you your min, your Q1, your median, which is your Q2, your Q3, and your max. So you'll have all the values. And in fact, we refer to those numbers as our 5-number summary, and it'll break that down into our quartiles. We'll also talk about the IQR, the interquartile range. Interquartile range is just a calculation that's Q3 minus Q1. And we use the interquartile range actually to find outliers. If you do 1.5 times the IQR, it will give you your, like the value that we work with for our outliers. So this calculation will help us find outliers. Outliers are values that fall way out of range of the expected, and so they're going to fall out of range of this value subtracted from the low end and this value added to the high end. So if it's outside, okay, I'm kind of rambling a little bit. We'll get more into that shortly, but the IQR is used for that. And so if I had to do it by hand, I would go through and just order the data, and I find the median. That's my middle quartile or my second quartile. And then basically I find the median of the lower half and the median of the upper half. So the median of the lower half is Q1 and the median of the upper half is Q3. But again, all of the stuff is given on the calculator, so we won't need to go through that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and find our 5-number summary for each of the classes. And again, that just means I plug that value in. So I'm going to go home and go to a new page, spreadsheet, enter, and enter my values. I'm going to pause this and enter the values, and then I'll have you do the same thing, and then when you're ready, start it up again and we can compare our numbers.